3, 2, 1, and 0, and liftoff.
Hey everyone, this is Greg Lafferty, the Rocket Guy Real Estate Investment Network, therocketguy.com. Thanks for joining us today. We talk about real estate investing because that's just what we do around here. You could do other types of investing, but we talk about real estate on this channel. And today, I'm going to reflect on a question I had not too long ago from a friend of mine that said, hey, which should I invest in? Commercial, residential, what should I do? And try to explain the differences and understanding the differences. Of course, the answer is yes. I mean, invest in both. Invest in anything that you're educated and can do and understand your investments, because you always want to understand what you're investing in, of course. So let's kind of peel the onion back a little bit about some of the differences between commercial investing and residential investing, so you kind of understand it a little bit. We're going to just scratch the surface, obviously, but just kind of expose you to the concept of commercial and take a few minutes and talk about that. I have assets in both classes, so I have some residential and some commercial. I have some multifamily, single-family, commercial office buildings, things like that. So we can kind of delve into this a little bit, and I'll kind of help open that up for you. So let's dig in. So what is commercial? Own some commercial property. Now, when we get into commercial analysis, I'm going to have to wear my tie. I mean, because that's just what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to kind of, stand up a little straighter, and I'm a commercial real estate investor, and talk like that. And that's just what they do. I don't know why it is, but that's just how it is. So if you get one guy who invests in a few houses, he's in his overalls and his rusty pickup truck. But if you start investing in commercial, you're obligated to buy a BMW. It just is the way it is. So what is commercial? So from a lending perspective, commercial actually includes residential if you own greater than 5 units in a complex. So when you, or actually 5 or more. So when you get up to 1 to 4s, quadplexes and things like that, that's going to be in more of the residential side for FHA. But when you get over to 5 or more units, you are in the commercial business lending group. I'm like, I just added 1 more unit. Yes. But now you're commercial. But generally, otherwise, when we think about commercial, we think about business operations, right? Maybe it's a hotel, hospitality. Maybe it's healthcare offices or doctor's offices and things like that. Maybe it's a restaurant. Maybe it's some kind of industrial park or an industrial building or manufacturing things, right? Warehouses, stuff like that. Maybe it's retail. Maybe it's where you go to the grocery store, right? That strip center out there where it has your grocery store and then some other smaller businesses on either side of the grocery store, a big Walmart complex, right? Where that's the big anchor tenant. And then you have everybody else that's trying to capture the traffic that comes into Walmart there. Or maybe it's office. So all those are different classes within the commercial arena, right? And there's others. I mean, we could talk all day, mini storage units, or maybe it's a land lease or raw land, different things like that. But generally, when you think commercial, those are the different classes that we talk about. So what's so special? Well, in a lot of cases, there's not much different, right? A lot of the fundamentals apply when you're talking between residential and commercial. Do we have to do our analysis? Yes. Do we have to do the math? Yes. Do we have to understand what are some of the driving factors between rent and expenses and how we evaluate the value, things like that? Absolutely. Do we have income? Yes. Do we have expenses? Yes. Do we have property taxes? Yes, maybe. We'll talk about that. Can it generate cash flow? Absolutely. Can we apply debt or leverage? Yes, we can in commercial property. So all those fundamentals apply. One of my friends actually told me, one of my mentors actually said, commercial's not much different. There's just more commas and more zeros. So typically the numbers are bigger. So what we generally find is when one is starting to invest in real estate, they're probably not going to jump into owning a Walmart center, right? They're not going to do that, okay? They're probably going to start with a single family house. It's what we know. It's where we live, right? And they're going to ease their way into it. But as your education expands and you learn more, and you might have some good mentors and other, which I would highly recommend, then these other classes you could step into. So I have a good friend that does a lot of industrial. I have another good friend that really likes retail and office. So everybody kind of finds their niche. Me, I really like residential, but I like more multifamily, more so than single family. So that kind of classifies as a commercial project, even though it's still residential. So it's kind of one of those little funny places there. But I do own some offices and some other things like that. So, so let's talk about just a second about some of the differences, because there are some. So although the fundamentals apply, when you peel it back and get into the specifics, they are very different. So there are different types of lease structures. Normally when you're looking at residential, you're like, is this a year lease or is it month to month? But all the leases are fairly common, right? They're fairly common. Someone lives in your place, they pay you every month. Okay, that is what it is. And you as the landlord are responsible for the maintenance at some level. They might have to change the light bulb, something simple, but you as the landlord in a residential arena are responsible for the maintenance. You're responsible for paying the property taxes on the property, the insurance, all those kind of things. But when you get into commercial, really there's some opportunities to structure the leases a little bit differently than you would in residential. And a lot of times attorneys and all are getting involved in these commercial leases, especially the big ones. There's a concept called triple net, and we can dig into that in a later episode. But basically what that means is the tenant pays you a monthly rent, and then they're also responsible for all the maintenance on the building. They're responsible for the taxes, the insurance, the landscaping, everything. That rent is your profit, and it is your debt service. So you're responsible for paying any loan or leverage amount, right? Loan payments, but they're responsible for paying everything else. So as property taxes go up, guess what? It costs them more money. Okay, it doesn't affect you. So that's a neat kind of structure if you can get it. There's some other structures as well out there, but it's very, very different than what we normally see in a residential marketplace. Also, the leases are generally longer term. These businesses want to come and they want to camp and they want to sit for a while because they're marketing their name, their address, their phone number, putting signs up, all that kind of stuff. So they're trying to drive traffic to their business. They certainly don't necessarily want to be in a month-to-month lease where you sit there and go, I'm not really happy with you being here anymore. You need to leave. Okay, they want to camp out a little while. So it's not unusual to see a 15-year lease or maybe a 10-year lease with 2 5-year extensions, right? So typically a residential tenant, they don't do extensions. Oh, I'm going to sign a year lease with 2 1-year extensions. No. Typically a residential lease will be about a year, and then after that it goes month to month, or you'll sit down with them specifically and say, well, let's sign another 1-year lease. So from a lease perspective, there are several differences. There are also concepts of income leases, where if you're in a retail center and you're trying to help drive traffic to their stores, maybe you get a percentage of their sales or something like that. And then escalations, where the rent rate can go up every so many years based on some kind of economic factor like consumer price index or some other inflationary kind of anchor. Whereas if the indicators for inflation go up, your rent goes up too. So there's some unique things out there. Remember, commercial is a little bit more sophisticated. So, these guys go to school for this stuff, right? And so when they do, they get a little creative in how they structure this for their businesses. So you just kind of have to think about that. The other main difference is that commercial spaces are typically evaluated based on the return to the investor. So when we look at buying some kind of commercial, even multifamily, it's not easy to compare one shopping center to another, right? different square footage, different location, different amount of foot traffic, different number of vehicles per day crossing in front of the road, where you're facing. So all that is so unique. It's not like we go into just a residential neighborhood and all the houses look alike, and this one sold last month for 150, so yours is a 150. Okay, that's not how that works. Typically, these are valued at the return for the investor. So how much is that investor receiving on a return on investment? And so when you're shopping for commercial property, you're not necessarily comparing all those other things that you would normally do in a residential thing. You're really looking at, well, this gives me a 5% return. This investment over here gives me a 6% return. This is 4. So those are the kind of things you're looking at more so than, hey, look, this house sold for this and this other house sold for that. So it's a little bit different, but you're dealing with investors. So you're dealing with a different level of buyer, a more sophisticated buyer than your typical retail shopper. So if you have a rental home, right, and you put that thing on the market, typically you're going to get a mix, maybe depending on the price point. You might get a mix of some beginning investors and retail buyers. Sally and Joe that are just buying a house. Okay. But when you get into an office building, the people that you're going to sell to or the people you're going to buy from are typically investors, and they're a lot more sophisticated. So the transactions just are a little bit different. Very little emotion. Now, don't get me wrong. You can get hotheads in there. Don't get me wrong on that. But it's not like you're buying it because you love it. Okay. That's totally different. I don't like the curtains. That's not why we're buying this house, or the kitchen is so beautiful with the new countertops. Okay. That's not why we're buying commercial. We are buying a return on our money. And so typically the other investors think the same way. The other thing that's kind of unique to commercial versus residential is that you're actually evaluating the tenant more so than the structure. Okay, so the tenant and the quality of the lease is probably more important than the age of the heating and air system. Okay, so when you go into a house to buy, you are really kind of crawling around the house and doing your due diligence and all. We've talked about the value of property inspections and all that kind of stuff. And you're going to do that in commercial as well, but you're buying income. So the real important thing is, what's the quality of the tenant? What's the financial stability of the tenant? Are they going to be able to pay their money? Because you are buying a return on investment. So it might be important that the roof is 20 years old and it needs to be replaced in the next 3 years. But hey, if the tenant's responsible for that, if that's the way the lease is structured, then, that's kind of their deal, right? But if you're buying a property that is leased by a tenant who just filed for bankruptcy, maybe that's real important for you to know. So is this a corporate guaranteed lease, or is this just a franchise kind of lease? Right? So the local Subway guy who's kind of like me, he just owns the Subway, he's leasing it, or is it Subway corporate that kind of guarantees that lease? So if something happens to him, they pay. So all that is a lot more important than just understanding, hey, do I have debris in the crawl space, which is stuff that you find on a residential home inspection report. So something to consider as a difference. The other is commercial tends to be a lot less management and a lot less maintenance. On a lot of the leases, those are, the tenant pays for the maintenance and things like that. It really, they're not going to call you, okay? They're typically not going to call. If the toilet plugs up, they fix it, okay? So if there are major capital improvements that are your responsibility in the lease, heck yeah, they're going to call you. Okay, if the asphalt is failing and they need their parking lot sealed and striped or something like that, and that is your responsibility, if it is your responsibility, then yeah, they'll call you. But it's not that kind of day-to-day, month-to-month kind of communication that residential property managers generally have. So it's just a different level. So a lot of people transition into commercial as they think about retiring. I want to move my assets from my residential properties to more commercial. I have less management, less maintenance, less hassle, and then I can go off and go to the beach or wherever their favorite place is. So there's less growth. It's more of kind of an income play than a growth play typically in that regard. They just want to maintain their stream of income, almost like in a stock portfolio where you want to migrate from growth stocks to either growth in income or even some kind of income fund, right? Where you move over into more bonds. So as you get into triple net leases with some big restaurant chain, something like that really is stable, been around for 100 years, that kind of moves into that income level where there's not a lot of growth. It's not going to go from 3 million to 4 million overnight in value, but that there's nice, stable income there. So the other difference is, hey, look, if how do we manage vacancies, right? So there's 350 million Americans out there, and everyone needs a place to live. So if you have a vacant apartment or if you have a vacant house, there are plenty of people out there, typically, depending on your market, that you can find a place in there. Okay, you change the price a little bit, get a little more competitive, you'll find a tenant, and they'll slide right in. So your downtime is fairly short, typically. But depending on the microeconomics, the economics of your area, right? If you lose a major anchor tenant in your strip center, your shopping center, that could take a minute to get back. So, typically the people that really recover quickly are the people with the best network. We always say that our net worth is our network, or vice versa. So if you have a good network of people and you understand and you're in communication with different real estate groups of different businesses, maybe you can get out there and pitch that space and get it leased quickly, but it typically takes a minute. The other thing about commercial is, and probably with some of these terms that I'm throwing out there, you can tell that it takes a little bit more specialized education. So you need to crank up your education a notch. And, we always say here at the Rocket Guy, this is all about education. So you can do anything if you've studied enough, right? Done some practice, study, get a mentor, those kind of things. So it does take a little bit more specialized education. You're not just going to come out. For houses, we bought a house before we own our house. We live in a house. We rented a house once. Okay, so it's easy to conceptualize how we're going to be a residential landlord. It's something in our normal nature that once you've experienced some of those activities, it's easy to replicate and be an investor. But we don't normally, grow up inside a shopping center, things like that. We don't live in a shopping center. We don't occupy a shopping center. Now I'm going to buy one. Okay, so it's just a little bit different. So it takes a little more outside education, not normally things that we come up through and learn and grow into. So it does take that specialized education, but they can be great investments. So as we think about commercial and residential, it's interesting to kind of peel that back a little bit. There are some great returns in commercial. There are commercial developers out there that make millions of dollars every year. So, and there's some great businesses out there that provide long-term income strategies. So it's interesting to kind of peel that onion back a little bit, understand the differences between residential and commercial, and then kind of think about how does commercial play within your overall portfolio? Is it a good balancer so I get good steady income off my commercial and I'm trying to get some good growth and some dynamic money coming and going in my residential side? Is it a good balancer that way? Or is it like, you know what, I'm going to stay to residential? Either way is fine, right? We all have our own goals and whys and things like that we've talked about. But it's just interesting to kind of get that education and get that exposure one to the other. Thanks for taking time today to join us at the Rocket Guy Real Estate Investment Network. And come check us out at therocketguy.com, where we have lots of additional assets out there for you to explore and to increase your real estate investment education. Feel free to like and subscribe and hit the thumbs up button, all those kind of things you're supposed to do on these platforms, and give us some good comments, some good feedback, and ask some questions. Maybe there's some things out there that we can explore together. I'll be happy to answer those as we go. So thanks a lot, and hope you have a great day.